Good day, students. This is Professor Hoven, and this is a lecture about what the magisterial teaching is, the official teaching of the Catholic Church about other religions. Are other people saved? Does everybody who's not a Catholic, not a Christian, go to hell? Right? That's kind of the brass tacks of it. So I will answer that. I have a handout on eClass. I also wanted to note something, just came into my inbox today about a website, and I just thought I'd mention it. If somebody might find it helpful in terms of maybe something you want to teach in the lesson plan assignment at the end of the term. This is the Magis Center. It's led by a Father Spitzer. He's an American Jesuit priest. That means his religious community is called the Jesuits. And he was a president of a Catholic university for about a decade. And now he does this Magis Center, which is the interaction between science, faith, and reason. And the latest posting on it is this why we need religion. And somebody asked a question about, do we really need religion? Can I just have faith in God? Why do I need a church or some kind of institution to look at it? So it's a neat video. I've got the link in eClass. You can click on it there and you can see about Father Spitzer, what he says about that. Boy, did I pause it on a funny moment for Father Spitzer. Sorry about that. Father. The other thing that's neat about this is that this website has all sorts of articles related to science and faith. So for instance, he's got one here about a doctor and the helping finding genetics of disease. All sorts of stuff here that I thought that you might really like and enjoy. So I pointed out, as a future religious educator, this is a great website. It's solid theologically. It's not very radical. It's radical in its depth of thought and how it engages faith with science. And it's a more of a dialogical approach. It's supportive. It's not antagonistic. And it's really good that way. I really quite like it, what they do. And they answer a lot of questions that I think kids have about faith and science. So it's a good way to go. And I know many of the students in this class are majors in the area of science, or maybe a minor even. So something worth checking out, the Magis Center, and different resources. And again, you maybe could teach from that. Okay, so that little bit about why we need religion in the Magis Center kind of sets it up in that for a resource. I'm going to turn now to the document that I have written. And I'll just simply review this. I'll walk us through it because it's heavy theological language. You know, the Catechism of the Catholic Church, I'm going to jump off screen. Probably shouldn't do that. This is its book. This is the official Catechism of the Church. There were different catechisms, of course, throughout the centuries. And this was promulgated in 1992, as we've mentioned already in the course. This catechism then is an adult catechism. It's for bishops and adults. And so it's not something we'd use with kids, but it's a good resource. And I'm going to walk you through. It's a pretty heavy duty, some explanations here. So the question we're answering is, what is the theological response to the value of other religions? Is there a place for other religions? Is it just a Catholic Church and nothing else? Hopefully you've read the chapter book that lays out the three different positions: exclusive, inclusive, and pluralistic. We'll try to maybe think about, I want you to think about, what do you think is the official teaching of the church? So this is based on the traditions of the church, based on bishops, and then finally the Pope's approval of the document back from 1992. Okay, I've lost my mouse. There it is. So the first question I have here from the Catechism: how can God's presence be known from the created world? All right. Is God only known from the Bible and the sacraments, or can God be found somewhere else? So this is a catechism. The numbers here are the paragraphs in it. In defending the ability of human reason to know God. Wow. So it's Christian teaching to believe that I can come to know God through my mind, through the natural world, okay? Through my experiences, through my friends, through a beautiful sunset, through knowing a restlessness, that there's something more to life, okay? These are clues that point us towards the divine. The church is expressing her confidence in the possibility of speaking about God to all people and with all people, and therefore a dialogue with other religions. with philosophy and science, with unbelievers and atheists, okay? That there can be a discussion about these things because it's partly through reason, all right? That reason can lead to an understanding of God. All right, and our experiences. Great. So some knowledge of God is possible. 843. So I'm skipping later in the Catechism because answers are kind of spread out throughout. So the Catholic Church recognizes in other religions that search among the shadows and images. So here it's saying that still the church's official teaching is that if you really want the full meal deal, it's in Jesus. That's the clearest understanding we have about God. However, other religions, through their images, through our own wanderings, have come to know God in a certain light, okay? For the God who is unknown yet near, since he gives life and breath and all things and wants all people to be saved. That's the graciousness of God. Thus, the church considers all goodness and truth found in these religions as a preparation for the gospel and given by him who enlightens all, that they may at length have life. Okay, so what is it saying? That all of these things, other faiths, can point to God and can point to the light of the truth. And here it's saying is a preparation for the gospel. Now some people are gonna find that offensive. I'll be right up front with that, okay? But it's saying that there is a value in other religions. Okay, that's a good thing. All right, it's not black and white. It's not either or. Okay, it is black and white. The church is saying is that really, but man, the church has something special, and it's going to proclaim that in Jesus. How about this? What about this phrase? This is an ancient phrase from church fathers in the first few centuries. Outside the church, there is no salvation. I remember hearing that from a parishioner at the church that we attended. He would say that. So when you hear that outside the church, there's no salvation, that would seem to mean if you're not Catholic, you're out, right? You're going to HE double hockey sticks. So reformulated positively, the Catechism says, it means that all salvation comes through Christ. All salvation comes through Christ, the head through the church, which is his body. Okay? So Christ is the source of salvation. Through his dying and rising, all people can have salvation. How do we know about it? Well, through the church, his body living and breathing today. If the Christians that had encountered Christ 2,000 years ago hadn't shared that he'd raised from the dead, well, without a church, you and I, this generation, we'd never hear about it. So based on itself, on scripture and tradition, the council teaches the church, a pilgrim now on earth, is necessary for salvation. All right, that it is necessary. So that Christ is the mediator and the way of salvation, that it is through Christ that salvation is gained, right? Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, as it says in the Gospel of John. He himself is explicitly asserted. Jesus asserted the necessity of faith and of baptism. Those are necessary things to have salvation. And how you're going to find those? Well, through the church. And that the baptism acts as a door, the door of faith. Through that door, once you pass through that door, you're changed. Hence, they could not be saved who, knowing the Catholic Church was founded as necessary by God through Christ, would refuse either to enter or remain in it. So there were those in the ancient church, right, in the early church, that would say, I think the church is wrong. And they went on a different way. And there's all these different heresies and false teachings that the church has declared wrong. You know, for instance, that Jesus wasn't divine, all right, or that he wasn't fully human. These sorts of things. And so those people rejected the church. That's what this is more driving at, okay? That's its focus. But make no mistake, the church, official church teaching is clear that you need Jesus to be saved and you need baptism for that to happen. All right, that's a necessity. Okay, we'll unpack that more as we go on. This affirmation is not aimed at those, through no fault of their own, do not know Christ in his church. So what we just said, it doesn't pertain to those who say they live in India and they're a Hindu and they've never heard of the Catholic Church, they've never been offered baptism. Okay, it's not aimed at them. So it goes on. Those who through no fault of their own do not know the gospel of Christ or his church, but who nevertheless seek God with a sincere heart and are moved by grace. So people who've never heard of Jesus can still seek God with a sincere heart and can be moved by grace. Sounds reasonable, right? I think that relates to even our experience. But who nevertheless, okay, I did that, try in their actions to do his will as they know it through the dictates of their conscience. So they listen to their conscience. What is good and right? What did they learn from their parents? What did they learn from people who are loving and caring? Did they follow those dictates of their conscience? Then they may too achieve eternal salvation. Okay? So it's not black and white either or, right? So it's not an exclusivist position here, that there is room. It's what we're finding is the church is the inclusivist position. It's still holding that, man, this Jesus and his story, the gospel, his life, that's still needed for salvation. There's no other way. But there's kind of these backdoor ways to get it through one's own conscience, through what they learned through their own faith tradition. So, although in the next paragraph, although in ways known to himself, God can lead those who, through no fault of their own, are ignorant of the gospel, to that faith without which is impossible to please him. The church still has the obligation to evangelize all. Even though God can work without this one way that we know of, not just through the gospel, the church still has an obligation to share the gospel because it's the good news. It's salvation, it's hope, it's life, it's a new creation, it's salvation, it's healing, it's justice, right? It's all these things, so the church is compelled to share it, right, and rejoice in it. The next one, is baptism necessary for salvation? This one's clear. The Lord himself affirms baptism is necessary for salvation. So we find that in the New Testament. Jesus says it. And then we also see that Jesus himself was baptized. Since we want to be like Jesus, that's what Christians are, then they should want that. He also commands his disciples to proclaim the gospel and baptize all nations. Got it. Baptism is necessary for salvation then, for those to whom the gospel has been proclaimed. So if somebody hears the word, has been preached the message, offer baptism, then they really need to be baptized, right? That's for their benefit. That's okay. That's what the church is trying to say here. The church does not know any means other than baptism that assures entry into eternal beatitude. That's how Jesus passed it on to the church. It's trying to relay that message. It's re-echoing it, the necessity of baptism. This is why she takes care not to neglect the mission that she has received from the Lord. All right. So that's why you'll even have cases where maybe somebody isn't going to church very often, but gosh darn it, if a priest says no to that, now we're getting into some troubled waters, difficulties in determining, what's proper preparation for baptism. Can anybody receive it? Well, it's an open invitation, but sometimes a priest will say, well, I need to see your church. You need to go through the RCIA, which seems reasonable, but you can see the matter, how important it is. Okay. And how necessity and what a gift it is. Finally, God has bound salvation to the sacrament of baptism, but he himself is not bound to his sacraments. That's a big one. Okay. So God has bound it for us humans, for the church, it's through the sacrament of baptism, but God can find other ways. So the Catechism then goes into a few different ways that can be done. One is baptism by blood. All right. It's like a desire for baptism. So baptism by blood is martyrdom, when somebody has died, killed for their faith. All right. Where they desire baptism, but they aren't actually allowed to be baptized. Another one is a catechumenate. All right. We saw that in the early church. Sometimes this was 3 years long. And if the catechumen is going on and that person dies, the church assures them of salvation. Again, kind of a desire for baptism when it hadn't happened. Okay. It goes on again. Somebody who's ignorant of the gospel, all right, but seeks truth and does the will of God according to with their understanding of it, can be saved. It may be supposed that such a person would have desired baptism explicitly if they had known its necessity. Okay. So here we have three other ways in 58, 59, and 60 of other ways that God can reach out salvation, that God is not bound to the sacrament, even though the church is. Of course, the last example is that children have died without baptism. Okay, it used to be thought that they were put in a place called limbo. It was neither hell or heaven. It was kind of this empty place. All right, it's the teaching now officially that God's mercy is there, right? They'll be with their parents one day in heaven. Good. Okay. So we just don't know. I'm going to finish with the story. My grandpa had a fight with his parish priest sometime when he was a young man. Quit going to church, wouldn't go back. Okay. This stubborn Polish Catholic. His children then didn't go. And it wasn't until my aunt wanted to get her first communion that the kids started to go, and my grandma went back to church. But my grandpa never went. It was only funerals and baptism. Funerals and weddings, he would go to church. And it wasn't until at the very end of his life, he had a stroke. He's in the hospital for 6 weeks before he passes. And there was this little short nun that would come in and say hello to him. And he wasn't always with it, and he was pretty quiet. But when she came in, his face lit up. His face lit up. And it was like he was having a vision. It was like he was dreaming he was in heaven. There was something, at first, the family laughed, but because it was just so curious. And then looking at it afterwards, it's like, what was going on then? All right. And that's where, when we say that the church is bound to the sacrament of baptism, but God is not bound. Some way that little sister was bringing out some desire in him, some desire for grace and reconciliation and peace. All right. And I believe my grandfather had that before he died. So we can't limit God in that ways, but we still respect what Jesus proclaimed and what was taught by the church. So that's the balance. When that last question, a summary of the church's position, I think it comes down to that baptism is necessary, but God is not bound by baptism. All right. Now, I know other Christian churches might just say you just need to say on your lips that Jesus is Lord and you're saved. Okay. But still, it's still a common practice amongst churches to baptize, whether it's children or simply adults. So that's my overview of this. You may have more questions. It hopefully is helpful. What we start to see is that things aren't black and white, that there are teachings that the church holds to, but it's out of, I think, for good of its members and for the teachings, that those teachings carry on. And so the life of Christians can be carried out and practiced all over the world. And that there's, I think, hopefully we work some of that out. This is a magisterial teaching. This is official teaching. We'll look at the artifacts about indigenous peoples and the church's teachings regarding that. And you might see a little bit of a different take. Okay. Anyways, that's it. I hope that was helpful. All the best.